Hello and welcome to the Tech Pixie Sparkle and Thrive podcast. I'm your host, Joy Foster, and I am delighted today to be joined by Donna White. Donna White is really an incredible woman, and we're so delighted she's here. She's the Senior Head of Digital Marketing at the Prince's Trust. Now, that is a big job, and her goal is to impact 1 million young people. So we're going to talk about that today. But more importantly, we're going to talk about what it's like to do digital marketing in the charity space, because we get a lot of questions about that. We have a lot of students who are going through a 90-day transformational program who are working with charities or in the charity space. And of course, there's a lot of questions that come up. And one of the biggest ones that comes up is around budget, because usually in those spaces, there's less budget and you still have to get the targets as well. So let's get started on this conversation. I'm really excited about it. So Donna, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
I would love for you to tell everyone your journey and how you ended up at the Prince's Trust. And then also, for those of you who don't already know the amazing work that the Prince's Trust does, maybe you can give us an overview of that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Let me start with that. The Prince's Trust helps 11 to 30-year-olds who are struggling to find work or perhaps struggling in the education system. And it provides free courses to help them develop their skills and confidence to get their lives back on track, into training, to find a job or start a business. And we've actually been operating for more than 45 years, which is fantastic. Sort of founded by the Prince of Wales, and it does some really great work. So last year we were pleased to celebrate that we have helped our 1,000,000th young person and are continuing that at this critical time. I've actually been working at the Trust for about 7 years now, which is fantastic and just goes to prove what a great organisation it is to work for. But I ended up in digital with a route in through working in comms and particularly PR, doing a mix of public and private sector work with a couple of agencies before making my way through that digital door. But it was something that really appealed to me because as much as I love comms and I love sort of working with journalists, the fact that, you know, in digital marketing, you can self-publish, straight away through your website or social media channels was just so appealing. You know, have the conversation in real time rather than waiting for that magazine or paper to sort of be sent to you. So all about that in the moment conversation.
And tell us about the work the Prince's Trust does for people who aren't so familiar. I mean, can you give us a story of someone's life who's changed?
Yeah, there's so many stories that I could choose from, but in particular, so we help a lot of women try to break into sort of businesses themselves. So we might have young women who have been single parents, maybe struggling to sort of set up a stable life for their sort of young families. And through us, they will do a free sort of initial 4-day course to learn sort of the fundamentals of business. So that'll cover everything from market research. It'll look at sort of tax and budgeting. It will also look at sort of some of the legal sides of things. And that sort of gives them an open door into, can I turn my business into, a reality? Can this idea really go somewhere? And if that is something that they decide to do, after the 4 days, we will pair them up with a business mentor. And over the course of up to 2 years, we will work with them. They can apply for sort of extra training, extra funding and grants, and they will have that go-to person, someone who is a business leader, that can help them navigate sort of any particular twists and turns in their journey. But through this course, you know, we've seen people set up comedy clubs. We've seen people set up sort of, you know, sewing and accessories and, you know, become sort of sellers on Etsy. We've seen people set up their own sort of cafes. But the great thing is the skills aside and the fact that they go on to employ other people and they give back to their communities, it's just that confidence and that self-esteem is just everything, because once you've got that, I definitely believe, and so does the trust, that you are limitless, which is great.
Absolutely. And what attracted you to digital marketing, particularly in the charity sector versus digital marketing anywhere else?
It was all about this idea of being part of something bigger than myself, being part of something very meaningful, and being able to have that regular interaction with the people that we are supporting. So hearing those stories and being inspired by them, there's sort of a joke at the trust that, you have to carry around some tissues with you because these stories are emotional and young people are achieving their goals and discovering their potential, and there's just something quite wonderful about that, and it doesn't matter who you are, you can take something away from that. So definitely that idea of working in an industry that is all about giving rather than sort of taking.
That's really interesting because a lot of women are attracted to working in the charity sector, either volunteering in it or working in it. One of the problems we see is a lot of women will volunteer their time and then they will get burnt out because there's a certain point where they kind of realize, well, I've actually got to earn some money for my family. And there are jobs in the charity sector. I mean, you're not working for free. So the good news is that you can get jobs in the charity sector. And I worked in the charity sector for a long time. And, and I had a good job that I really enjoyed. And I did it in the comms and digital marketing space as well. And it was all about getting young people exposed to entrepreneurs in schools. I worked with Founders for Schools and I was their second employee. And it was a real adventure because we had no marketing budget whatsoever at the time. And so everything had to be organic. So I got really good at organic social media marketing and really good at partnerships because that's the fastest way to grow in an organic environment. But, it was really interesting to, be trying to reach particular people with an organic strategy. Which networks does the Prince's Trust concentrate on to make sure that your messages are getting out and cutting through the noise?
Yeah, so we concentrate on the big four, which for us from a national perspective is Twitter, where we are sort of everything to everybody. We are taking part in trending conversations, but also pushing our own agenda. We're also on Facebook, where we sort of try to communicate to young people, but through the communities that work with them. So parents, guardians, referrers. We're also on Instagram, where we try to talk directly to young people and leverage the great features that are coming through on that channel. And we're also seeing loads of engagement on LinkedIn, thanks to our network of partners as well. So that's where we tend to sort of base ourselves. But over the last 6 months, we have been trying to become a little bit more accustomed to TikTok, although I can't really keep up with my dancing steps very well. But it's good.
I was wondering if you were venturing into TikTok. It's interesting. It's interesting to watch TikTok, kind of evolve. And I'm always a person who says, okay, let's sit back, let's let like the dust settle, and then say, okay, let's move forward strategically or not, and I'm finding the same thing with Clubhouse. Kind of, okay, let's sit back, let's watch, let's see how it's being used, and then let's teach people how to use it and leverage it. But I do think TikTok is is quite popular with the younger generation. And you're finding that there's an even younger generation on there than there is, let's say, on Instagram, for example. It's interesting, though. I love how you explained that you're not doing the same thing on each of those networks. You're speaking to different people. So on LinkedIn, you're talking to your mentors. On Instagram, you're talking directly to potential people who want to work with the Prince's Trust as service users, people who are going to be using the service. And then Facebook, you're actually talking to the carers, the parents, the people who are connected to them. And I love that. And that's important for people to hear, because a lot of times people don't understand. One of the biggest questions I get in our social media superhero bootcamp is, can I just put the same thing on all the networks? And I always say, yes, you can, and no, you shouldn't. That's kind of the way I say it. And there are things you can share on each one of them, but you could share the same piece of content, but in that scenario, you're actually speaking to 3 different people. And so the same content can be changed and adjusted. The same video can be changed and adjusted. that video you put out on Instagram, you're going to be saying, hey, do you want to work with us?
Yeah.
That video you're going to be putting out on LinkedIn saying, hey, we need some more mentors, and for the parents, it's saying, did you know that your child can access these services? So they're very different messages. And I think that's really important for people to hear. And I love how you explained that when we went through it. Talk to us about some campaigns. Obviously, as the woman in charge, you are responsible for these campaigns. Give us one that you're most proud of, and talk about, what it took to bring it to fruition.
Yeah, well, this is a campaign stroke event which we hosted earlier this month, which, I can take a little bit of credit for, but it's the team around me and that I work with who did a real lion's share of this. But each March we host the Prince's Trust Awards, and that's to recognise the achievements of 7 amazing young people who have been able to transform their lives and their surroundings thanks to their own hard work and just a little bit of a nudge and support from the trust. And normally it takes place at the London Palladium, and it's a fantastic red carpet event and so many VIPs and celebrities, and it's just a great way for our community to sort of get together and hear those stories firsthand. But this year, lockdown, we got away with it in 2020 but this year we definitely needed to pivot to a virtual event. And I think a year on, it was, how do you make something engaging? Everybody is zoomed out. So you just need to be really mindful of your audience and make sure that you're not just doing it for the sake of it. But the team were able to, brief in some fantastic, emotive, short case study video clips. We also had some wonderful magic moments that we called them, where maybe a young person was telling their mentor that they had won this award, or vice versa, or they might have had a celebrity sort of drop in and just sort of say, hey, I've heard that you're doing really well. And even in one instance, one of our winners who had been working on a fixed term contract with an employer was told there and then by his boss that he was going to be made permanent, which was just fantastic. And he was there with his mum, and it was just lots of sort of cheers. And it was wonderful. It was, hosted by celebrities. So it still had that sort of, glamorous feel. We had some real key fundraising call to actions, sort of like a little ticker tape effect, which was really good. But I think what really made it, which is different to what you would be in an auditorium, was the live chat that was running alongside. And actually, it was so nice to know that you were watching an event at the same time as a number of people, lots of thumbs ups and emojis sort of happening. And I think that's something which, works really, really well in an online setting, that sense of community.
Well, and you're right. Everyone's had to pivot their events online this year, and I've attended several, and some of them are done really well, and some of them are not done so well. And everyone's coping as well as they can. And in some cases, we started doing online events. Last year we did 2 face-to-face get-togethers, and we decided to do it online. And actually, I don't know. I mean, I definitely want to go back to face-to-face, but I also think there's part of me that thinks we might continue to do it online, because we now work with people across the country. So getting everybody in the same room together is difficult. And so I think that's really interesting. But I love that you pulled that off and had a really great experience. And what's interesting is, as you were saying that, I think people can hear the emotion in your voice about, those stories and those case studies. And I think that's the special thing, is that if you do it right, it's actually just as impactful online as it is in person. And the stories and the transformation that you're celebrating really makes you teary and makes you get emotional, because the work that you're doing really is transforming lives. And I think that's why people are attracted to working in the charity sector. Like you said in the beginning, you want to do something that is making a difference. And I think it's really exciting when you are able to see that right in front of your eyes. So let's talk about your comms and fundraising strategy in 2021. How is it being impacted? How are you having to pivot or change anything to make sure that you can continue to provide the service that you provide?
So a lot of our courses have had to sort of move online as well. So, we traditionally do lots of fantastic face-to-face delivery, but like every organization, get your your broadband stood up and get virtual. But I think for us, what we've learned over the last 12 months is that we've known that the pandemic has been coming, and we knew it was going to move from a medical conversation to an employment social issue. And so the Prince's Trust has almost been sort of waiting, doing some research in the background, identifying case studies, leveraging partnerships in preparation for that to stand us in good stead, because 2021 is the time to be having this conversation. So for us, as part of our sort of comms and fundraising strategy, I would say that research is really important for us right now, to have those strong statistics in order to generate those news hooks and cut through. And I think, you can see that when you're sort of reading through news apps, it's a lot of data, but it's useful data at the moment, and we're just really happy to be part of that conversation. So whether that's feeding into monthly unemployment statistics with case studies, or whether that's our own research, which is looking at how young people's mental health has been impacted by job losses, it's a narrative which we can sort of build upon and say, actually, the Prince's Trust is here for young people now and in the future. And that creates a bit of a pathway for us to say, we are a charity and we do rely on donations, and have a really clear shopping list of how people could support our work and make a difference, whether that's sort of, small amounts or larger amounts. Because one of the things that we are occasionally up against is, the Prince's Trust, we've got this sort of really nice sort of association in our title. But we do need to sort of dispel the myth that, we're not funded by other organisations, that we are a charity in our own right. So it's definitely sort of making that clear.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And what are some of the core challenges in your role, and how do you overcome them?
So some of the challenges that I face, I guess, working at the Trust, is that we are such a large organisation, and there are a lot of complexities occasionally in just how projects are set up or how teams are established. So I always sort of say that you need to make a lot of friends within the Prince's Trust, because you never know who you're going to be talking to, and a number of people you might need to involve in your projects to give them the best chance of success. So definitely I rely on sort of, great communication skills, stakeholder management, making sure that I can just really build that trust with people. But doing that in a way that is authentic to me, so people sort of call me, oh, it's Donna from Digital, or it's Digital Donna, sort of, straight talking. She's not going to like overcomplicate things with you, because I don't want to be a complicated person. Sometimes in digital marketing, there is a lot of tech behind the scenes and things that you can sort of talk about. But actually what people want is just a simple story. How do you get from A to B? So that's sort of what I try to do to sort of work around that. But I think another one of the challenges is just the prioritization of projects. So with any sort of digital transformation, you have these big, bold, ambitious ideas, but you can only do a handful of things well. So occasionally it's a bit of a waiting game to make sure that your objectives can sort of fit into something a little bit bigger, or it might sort of look a little bit different. But in order to sort of get that done. So I might be sort of, waiting for some website development opportunities. But whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to focus my attention on social media and make sure that my communities are engaged and I'm learning lots over there. So yeah, never a moment wasted.
Never a moment wasted. Yeah, of course. Now, what advice do you have? Because we have a lot of people in the charity sector who are working or volunteering, or even running. What's happened a lot as well is we'll have women join our program to learn how to use social media, and then they'll actually launch their own charities as a result. So they're raising money for their own charities. What advice do you have for someone who has a limited budget but is looking to grow their donations, their engagement, and all, reach more people really?
So even something that we do at the Prince's Trust is every project starts with a little test and learn. Run these simple A/B split variable tests across channels to really try to understand, what is making people engage with you. Is it the content? Is it the message? Is it the audience type that you've developed? So you don't have to go straight in and invest, significant amounts. Just start small, find out what works for you. And then when you have something that you feel is quite robust and you've maybe tested it a few times, that's when you can sort of scale up. And I think that's where sort of the great learnings are from. That's where you can really get to know and understand the channels and the algorithms of those channels. But I would also say that if you do have limited budgets, occasionally, as much as it's great to sort of do the big brand awareness piece and really push the sort of charity name or push the sort of key products and services, take a moment to sort of listen. What are the hooks that are being talked about on those channels? What conversations are being had? And actually, maybe you can sort of tap into that as part of your key message first, pique people's interest, and then sort of convert that into some sort of brand understanding.
I like that, the idea of just testing it out a little bit first and seeing. I think it's really interesting because I had such a hard time because they didn't have a budget for any kind of marketing when I started with the charity that I was with, apart from the person, right? And it was really hard to explain. If you put a little bit of money into the paid advertising side of things, we can really move faster. And that's what's really hard sometimes to explain, because every penny counts and you don't want to waste anybody's money. But, I found it was really hard to get that conversation across, that it was like, if we invest, we can move faster, towards the goal that we want to go towards. And I think for a lot of charities, they think, well, I can't invest in any kind of paid advertising because that's wasting money. Would you counter that argument at all?
I would definitely say that a lot of these channels, you do have to pay to play if you really want to sort of be seen. I think organic is, fantastic. It's the bread and butter, and that's, where some really great sort of conversations are happening. But if you want to reach somebody who is not connected with you in any way, if you don't want to have to rely on your sort of homegrown fans, then you definitely do need to sort of put a little bit of money behind it. The channels are just making it more and more difficult to compete if you are not. So then I would say to that is get involved, get stuck in, but don't over rely on the numbers. The numbers tell one side of the story. They say, how many people saw it, how many people clicked, and of course those things are important and need to be reported upon. But I think there's always a little bit more to sort of share, and only you who are sort of part of that campaign planning can help to sort of put that together. So definitely organizations need to educate people. It's not just on the money raised. It's not just, how many people were clicking through or, watching a video from start to finish. We know these things are virtually impossible to control. So look for the comments. Did people feed back on what you were saying? Have they started following you as a result of this? There's lots of great ways to assess a campaign.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think the comments are particularly important, and a lot of people miss that part, and they don't reply to every comment that comes in. We have a no comment left behind rule at Tech Pixies, and we teach that adamantly, because pretty much unless you've got thousands of comments, you should be able to reply to every comment. And actually, we know there's a wonderful woman I interviewed a while ago named Angela Laws, and she runs a Facebook page that probably now has over 300,000 followers.
Wow.
But she has an ad that's been running for over a year, and it's got 6,000 comments, and she just replies every time someone leaves one. She replies. It's like a daily thing, because it shows that there's someone who cares, that there's someone, someone's actually heard if you've taken the time to comment on something, it shows that someone's taken the time to acknowledge it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so it sounds like you like that rule.
I do. It's the cherry on top. It's what people remember. And, it's always, as a user, if a brand gets back to me, or if they want to use, a tweet or share what I've said, then it just makes me feel good. Whether I'm talking to like a biscuit company or a chocolate company, it doesn't go unnoticed. So I think that's a really good rule to have. And I think people can be nervous around comments. Social media opens up a lot of different types of comments, and that's something that we have seen within our organization recently, and it can cause a panic effect. But you just need to treat each comment on an ad hoc basis, respond as you would. I don't like to sort of get into this habit of hiding comments, deleting things. It should be managed if you've got sort of a good plan in place.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, we very rarely have had a negative comment, but when we have, I've replied very thoroughly with the information that may or may not be true from their perspective. But also sometimes it's, taking it offline as well, being able to say, okay, here's my response, so that everyone sees that you've publicly responded, but then to say, I've direct messaged you so we can carry on the conversation. And sometimes that takes it off of the main feed. But yeah, I know it's so important, to be okay with both types of comments. One of the things interestingly enough, I was saying to our students is that in our social media superhero bootcamp is basically, if you are creating an environment where your messaging is positive and encouraging and uplifting, you're going to attract people that like that kind of messaging. And, you shouldn't be afraid of creating that kind of messaging that someone's going to come, fire back at you. Mm-hmm. It's usually when you're out there creating controversial statements and being a little bit controversial that you also then get the controversial backlash. Not always, but, one of the things that I think is important is to craft your message in a way that you are attracting the type of people that you want to be attracting, and really, quite frankly, repelling the people you don't want to be attracting, for sure. But I know what you mean. I like that idea of ad hoc and taking each person, because we don't know what's going on in people's lives. And one of my mentors has always said, hurt people hurt people. And I think that's so true. And when someone is upset and they say something on your Facebook page, or they tweet something back at you or whatever, it's really a reflection of what's going on in their life and not a reflection of what's going on in yours. And if you can recognize that from the get-go and then respond from a compassionate place of empathy, that's where the personal human connection comes into play. Yeah. Let's talk about the trends in 2021 that are going to be shaping charity. I mean, obviously COVID is still here. We've still got to deal with that. Any other trends you see shaping the conversation in 2021 for charities?
Well, I think you sort of alluded to it earlier when you mentioned sort of Clubhouse and this idea of, audio spaces. I think will be really, really big this year. I know it's something that Twitter is going to be rolling out slowly but surely. And I think, the people that will be in a good position are those with some great existing sort of podcast content, which they can draw upon. And they've got a good group of speakers and stakeholders that can have interesting conversations. So I'm really interested to watch the audio discussions. I think for us, as an organization, we're not quite ready for something like Clubhouse. But I think where we already have an existing presence like Twitter, I think that's something that we would find really interesting to lean into and consider how we can use that to complement our existing social media strategy, just giving it that little bit of extra edge. But in addition to that, I also think that's something that we will see, which is much broader than sort of like the charity sector, but is this idea idea of fusing interests and industries. So obviously the gaming world is so big at the moment with things like Twitch, and I think you'll be able to sort of see that really converse well with music. So I think I've seen articles recently where music artists are thinking, hey, I like gaming, I like talking to my community, but I wonder if we can all do this and maybe make some music at the same time. And that is just going to be a fantastic way for people to connect with the people that they look up to, and, you know, create something really interesting together.
That was so interesting. And yeah, you're right. It's that trying the new technologies out and then seeing how they work and how they don't work. I mean, we have one student in particular who has really embraced Clubhouse, and she, you know, she had the confidence to go on to Clubhouse because she had all the other networks under her belt. But for her personally, it's become the number one place to gain followers, because one of the things we're seeing happening on Clubhouse is if you're active, when you step up to the stage and you speak or when you host, you actually get a lot of followers, because when people go to check out your profile, the only thing they can do from your profile is go to your Instagram or Twitter account. So it is growing people's followings just by being in the room, just by opening up, just by speaking. And yeah, it's becoming an interesting environment. I mean, immediately my thought about Clubhouse was, okay, this is basically, you know, live podcasting. It's basically what we're doing right now, but in an audio environment. And so, you know, it's basically a radio show. Anyone can start their own radio show right now, and, you know, take callers, and, you know, it's uncanny. It's brilliant. And it was one of those things that you kind of think, gosh, how come no one thought of this before? Right.
Yeah.
You know, we're not driving around in the car right now, but I think about when I do get in the car, I love to listen to a good talk show, but, you know, it's even cooler if I can choose which one I want to listen to at the time that I want to listen to it at. So, you know, I find it really, really interesting. So, but I want to thank you so much for your time today. You gave us some really valuable insights into the charity world, and especially from the digital side. And of course, the work that you guys do is incredible. What do you think, would you say, has been your biggest learning in this position? You know, you came from an agency background, and now you're heading up digital for the Princess Trust. What's been your biggest learning from that?
I think the biggest learning for me throughout my career, because I'm traditionally, you know, a doer. Give me a job, I will do it for you, and I will find a way to make it, you know, sort of the best document or the best project you've ever been involved with. But I have been fortunate enough to sort of pivot in my career and start to think back, and it's less about the quantity of work that you do, and it's about the quality and that strategic thinking. So rather than thinking, you know, what does the next week, what does the next month bring, I'm trying to get into a better positive habit of thinking of the next sort of 6 months, the next year, and really working with you know, other senior leaders within the organization to understand the difference between what the business is now and what the business needs to be, and how I can build a bridge to take us there. So that big picture thinking is a little bit scary to begin with, but actually it's a really exciting place to be, because it just leads to fantastic conversations. It means you go away and you do some research and you talk to people, and you know, try to sort of think, if I was going to restart this organization tomorrow, how would I approach it? What would I do? And it's okay to ask those questions, because even if just a couple of sort of, you know, bits sort of fall out of that, that can be really, really helpful.
That is really interesting. That thought of bigger thinking is so interesting, because people don't do that enough. And I think you're right, is getting out of the doing and really focusing on the being and what's the bigger picture. And it's really hard for people to do that, but it's really necessary. And like you said, it can be a bit scary, you know, to say, well, if we had to start all over again, how would we do that? That's really interesting. Heather has a comment. She says, it's so important to build in support and resilience training and workshops for your volunteers. That's a great point. So how do you take care of your volunteers? How do you keep them fresh and wanting to go for another round?
Well, I think, absolutely right. It's all about sort of the training that's been put in place. So making sure that people aren't just thrown into particular tasks, but there's actually a really nice, supportive onboarding journey for volunteers, and that they have a clear buddy within the organisation. So it might not be the people who are directing or working with them day to day. It could be somewhere else in the organisation, so that they feel really supportive. And it's always sort of checking in with volunteers. It's not taking for granted, oh, you all right for another 6 months? You're okay for another 6 years doing the same thing on a, Wednesday, Thursday, that sort of thing. It's treating them as if they were staff, have those sit down check-ins, have those one-to-ones, because volunteers are the heart of what we do at the Trust. So they are very much part of the same community. So treating them as if they were a staff member.
That's so interesting. And also, I know a lot of the people that are volunteering to mentor at the Princess Trust are quite high caliber people. So they're very busy in and of themselves already. So making sure that they feel supported, I guess, is really essential. Well, this has been a really insightful conversation, and it's a privilege and an honor to get to speak to someone in such a high position in such a well-known charity. So we're really thankful that you took the time out of your day to spend it with us at Tech Pixies, and just want to thank you for all the work that you do changing young people's lives. It's a very, very important thing to do, and it really will make the world a better place. So Donna, thank you for your time and all of your wonderful insights.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Thanks, everyone. Really enjoyed it.